Hi, this is Paul. Some of you OG TLCers will remember Nolan, and some of you who've been on the Bridges of Meaning Discord and some of the other subsequent Discords will remember him. He reached out to me. Nolan has a book out, Through the Fire, A Pilgrimage of Poetry. And so he asked if he could come on and we could talk about his book. And I haven't spoken with Nolan, at least via Zoom, for a few years. If you go way in the back catalogs, you can find our conversations. But Nolan, welcome. Thanks for reaching out.
Yeah,
So tell me about this journey.
it's kind of started quite a while ago, so I had sort of gotten into writing poetry, and I had done maybe 10 poems or something where I really um, felt like I finished and completed them. But I had a lot of just sort of fragments and bits and pieces of a lot of other stuff, so I wanted to do some sort of book or project that would sort of fit together and have some sort of theme to it, as opposed to just a collection of poems. I wanted it to have sort of something to tie it together. So I had read The Divine Comedy by Dante a few times. There was some things in there that sort of resonated with me. So yeah, I sort of came up with the idea to play with those patterns and sort of write something that followed a similar arc, but maybe had some different elements. It's maybe sort of taking into account some things going on today and just some things in my own life. And yeah, just sort of trying to connect it and understand it a bit better. So yeah, it was sort of the first good idea where I thought I could make a book out of it. So that was kind of where it started from.
As I said, I'm sure that there are plenty of people watching this who know you online and know you through Bridges of Meaning and some of the other sub discords that have developed. But maybe you can bring new people who haven't seen any of this sort of up to speed on how did you get into this TLC space, and then maybe a little update in terms of how you've seen it develop over time, and then how that sort of intersects with your own journey, because I'm sure your own journey is deeply entwined with this poetic journey.
Yeah, sort of similar to a lot of other people. Sort of started with Jordan Peterson. And so I was studying engineering for a few years. Then decided not to continue with that. So I was sort of um, not sure what I was going to do next. So soon after that was when I sort of encountered Peterson. That sort of gave me a bit of a direction to go in. So I kind of, um, well, the previous conversations we had, I was sort of one focused a lot on the Gulag Archipelago book that Peterson references fairly often. So that was one of the first things I sort of read. And I tried doing some more like nonfiction type writing, some essays and stuff, which I just sort of didn't really share that much. It was just sort of more of a personal thing. So I did some writing. I tried writing a novel at some point, but it wasn't really for me. I don't think it's sort of more long form. Whereas I feel with poetry, it gets a bit more to the point. So that was a bit better for me. And then just, yeah, encountering people like Jonathan Pichot, yourself, and John Vervaeke, and just, yeah, those sort of ideas resonated with me and were helpful at the time. So a lot of the book is sort of reflected on a lot of those ideas, some of those inspirations. Yeah, sort of tying it to the Divine Comedy, just also more personal experiences. So yeah, it was sort of my way of digesting all that information that I was taking in. Or, uh,
Now, did
yeah,
you, if the book is divided, sort of like the Divine Comedy, it's part one is bitter waters, part two is the mountain, part three is the heavens. And so there's a sense of that. Where did you get the art? Did you do the art yourself?
it was actually Sally that did those illustrations.
Okay. Okay. So
So
some of you might know who he means by Sally. She's also been on the channel, and you can find a variety of conversations that I've had with her. Well, talk to me about obviously the Divine Comedy, the Inferno, the Purgatorio, and the Paradiso. How has that movement, how did you sort of, how does that movement intersect with your life?
I don't know if the entire movement does, but yeah, I guess, or maybe just to go through what I sort of think of what the three parts are about. The first one, if you're familiar with John Vervaeke, you might have heard the term reciprocal narrowing, which is sort of a way to describe addiction, I think. Sort of the world closing in around the person and the object of their addiction, sort of becoming their whole world and sort of consuming them in a way. And so that sort of resonated with me with the idea of sin and a lot of the Inferno in Dante's poem, sort of using these poetic images to describe how the people there are sort of caught up in whatever their particular sin was. So the first poem in the book is sort of that image there of the snake is sort of a way to think of that.
Maybe I should read. Is there anything you'd like me to, I can read some of this for people if shall I read the first poem in the book just to give people a sense of it?
But I did actually record a reading of it. If I can play that somehow, or if you want to read it, I don't know what would be easier.
Well, let's see. Okay, now multiple. So if you can share your screen with the recording, that or I can read it, either one. I don't know which is easier to do.
And try sharing it. I've had some problems with my sound not being very loud, so try it here. But if it doesn't work, then I guess you can just read it. Just make sure my volumes. So just let me know if this is not loud enough. The call, the path I walked, burst into fire, barring me from my desired destination. I set a new course. Again, fire flashed forth. I turned to my left, my right, Fire had me in its sights. Whichever path I pursued, fire soon fenced my way. No matter which trail, flames found me without fail, stalked me like prey. Around and around I turned, no escape. Fire all around me, snake that bound me, coiling tighter, burning brighter. I couldn't move. The dark storm of death loomed. Fear struck like lightning. My hope like hail fell. Wings not my own rescued me from hell. I floated without fear, high above the blaze, above the whirlwinds, the storm within. And that lady of light asked me, are you ready to fall into the depths of it all?
Very nice. It was a little soft.
Yeah,
Maybe I'll read the second one. Into fire. Abandon all hope, ye who enter here. Dante Alighieri. In silence, a silhouette approached and spoke. Do not fear. The one that saved you sent me. She will find you again. For now, follow me. Who are you? The way out of here. What else I am, you must discover. Speak no more. The heavens themselves beckon, and though they are patient, the wolves will have no mercy. So stay here, or I followed him, past flame-torched trees, towards the darkness. I thought I had escaped. He halted and beckoned me to enter the door, carved into the cliffside, lit by a foreboding flame. They are very much following along.
yeah,
Now, obviously, for people who don't have the appetite to read the entire Divine Comedy, this is briefer.
yeah.
um, why the Divine Comedy?
Um, I'm not totally sure. It just sort of resonated with me, I guess. And hearing, I think in the past, Peugeot has done a few videos on it. And it just, I don't know, sort of um, resonated with me. I'm not totally sure why. There's this other book. I think it's pretty popular among the Orthodox. It's a pretty recent book. It's called The Ethics of Beauty. I found reading that sort of along with Dante, the two sort of fit together.
Hmm.
Is that book sort of talks a lot about I don't know if I could define it the way the book quite does, but it talks about like what the Greeks would call eros. It sort of explains how that could work with Christianity and sort of usually we think of that word just sort of in a sexual connotation. But yeah, just sort of the idea of attraction in general can sort of be something that explains the spiritual journey in terms of maybe attraction to particular virtues, or even more generally, just the beauty of a church or something. can be something that sort of draws us forward, which is sort of very similar to Dante's comedy in terms of the character of Beatrice. Sort of, yeah, this image of a beautiful woman that sort of draws him along and guides him through this journey. So those were some of the other ideas that sort of resonated with me.
What did what did you learn in the process of writing this book?
I guess it's probably not what you're asking, but I learned how to write a book,
Which is not a small thing.
yeah, which is helpful to figure out all the different pieces and how they go together and figuring out how to publish it and all that was good in the sense that, if I want to write another book, it's going to be quite a bit easier to navigate. So
Now, there, Valerie, I should have Valerie on. She was on Karen Wong. Valerie, of course, is spearheading an effort to put out an anthology, a TLC anthology that is, I don't think it's released yet, but it's coming soon. Do you think writing, there was, they as for Bridges of Meaning, pretty quickly, a Bridges of Meaning writers group started. Do you think writing is going to be sort of the next iteration of what this strange little online community starts to produce?
I think that could be part of it. I think it's a bit hard to say because I'm not sure how many other people are. I guess Michaud is sort of doing a lot more, um, releasing his comic book and the fairy tales. So there does seem to be a bit of a move to more creating creative things, which I think is a good thing to sort of maybe get away a little bit from more of the intellectual sort of philosophical conversations, which is sort of been a lot of what this little corner has been. So yeah, I think just maybe going more into like participatory things, and there seems to be more of a movement um with a lot of the conferences and stuff. It's more in person, more embodied. So I think that's sort of the general direction that it's going.
And it's interesting that so Peugeot getting into the publishing space, like you said, in terms of his comic books, God's Dog, in terms of the fairy tales, and this too is, I mean, it's very classically oriented. Obviously, the Divine Comedy is in some ways, it's one of the pillars of classics that are out there, and so it's interesting that it's this type of thing that is being, and it's not incidental, it seems to me, to put things to paper, because there's something about paper that's very different from screens. The speed of paper is slower than the speed of screens. So, and it's also, and the fact again that poetry is a a big piece of this too. And as you just said before a minute ago, I mean, you tried your hand at novel writing, but poetry seemed to get at it more. And it's the it that is sort of the fascination at the center of it all.
Yeah, I think poetry just worked a little bit better with my personality or something. So yeah,
What do you hope now you've accomplished this? Did Sally also design the cover?
it's actually a different artist that I found.
Okay, okay. Um, now that you've accomplished this, um, what are your what do you think is what are you working on now?
I think I'm still trying to figure that out. Um, I think I'm going to work with someone soon. Some people might know him, Marvin or two more V's.
Yep.
He makes sort of music with a lot of Peterson and a lot of talks from Peugeot and whatnot. So we might take a few of the poems and try to make a song out. Yeah, try to make a few songs out of them. I know poetry is not necessarily the most popular thing. It's a bit of a niche. So
Well, poetry without music is sort of a niche, but most songwriting is poetic. Poetry sort of was consumed by, music and songwriting and so I think that sounds like a very reasonable next step.
yeah, yeah. I guess just maybe sort of an update. I've sort of been the last few years. I've been learning a bit more about music and some of the music software. So I might do something with that in the future as well. Yeah, maybe mix music or something. So I'm sure about that. Then sort of, I might try to do some more on my Substack because I've been more focused on the book, so I haven't really been able to write much for that. So yeah, that might be another direction that I go.
I'll have to find your Substack and make sure it gets linked. Um, is your Substack under your name or what's your Substack under?
Called pointing at patterns.
There it is. All right, good. So I will include that in the um, I will include that in the notes. Whenever you subscribe to a new Substack, you've always got to click through about um, five. Do you want to subscribe to these Substacks too? No. Do you want to publicize on all your social media that you subscribe to this? No. Do you want to? I mean, it's just Substack. I like
Yeah,
the platform, but it's uh it's a little much sometimes. So let me get this into my notes so I can remember to get it into the show notes.
yeah,
So you sent me this copy. Your book is on Amazon,
yeah.
and I can put that in the notes too. Where else do you want to go with this? Well, let me ask you, of the three movements of the Divine Comedy, the Inferno, the Purgatorio, and the Paradiso, the Inferno is always the one that gets all the press. If there's any part of the Divine Comedy that people are interested in, it's the Inferno. The Purgatorio, probably second, and the Paradiso probably third. Did you notice that when working through this, that some parts were easier than others, and which parts were easiest and which parts were hardest?
Yeah. Um, they weren't that much different in terms of the writing. But yeah, a lot of people only know the Divine Comedy as Dante's Inferno. So yeah, I definitely have noticed that in more popular culture. It's definitely the part that's emphasized. We did a book club on the Divine Comedy a year or two ago on the Discord, the writers server. So I found with Paradiso, it is a bit abstract at times. So I think it's sometimes the most difficult to understand. The Inferno and the Purgatorio are a little more image based. You can picture what's going on, whereas in Paradiso it's a little more abstract or spiritual, you could say. I found the third part a little easier to write,
Hmm.
just because I had the poems follow a more like a form. So like yeah, the part three was more form poems, which was sort of once you get the idea, you can sort of know where you're at with it and how far along you are, just in terms of filling in the different elements that that particular poetic form asks for. So that made it easier in a way, whereas the other ones are not structured as much, which can be a bit more difficult to figure out when you're done with it exactly.
Do you have a favorite English translation?
I think there's one, the Hollander translation.
It's
There's Yeah, there's some other ones that are like more poetic or more true to the original structure, but I find that translation is the easiest to understand what they're saying. Although it's a little less poetic.
well, poetry. I mean, anybody who studies the Bible seriously runs into the fact that poetry is more difficult to translate into other languages than prose, just by its nature. And so when you deal with something like the Divine Comedy, which is all poetry, if you don't have, now when I first read it in college, which was a long time ago now, I didn't know Spanish like I know now. I suppose I could try reading the Italian through my knowledge of Spanish, and maybe I could get more from the Italian. When I was in Italy recently, I noticed that I could, if I listened to enough Italian, just knowing some Spanish, I could get a gist of some of those things, because of course Spanish and Italian both have their roots in Latin, and the French is just, the French I still find impenetrable, but reading French isn't as difficult.
Yeah. I just need to take a minute here if you don't mind.
Sure, I'll pause.
Okay.
All right. So you say poetry came easier. Do you have do you have any idea why?
When I was trying to write the novel, I sort of had direction where I wanted to go, but I would sort of have to spend a lot of time thinking about how to get the characters there. So I don't know, like poetry's a little more immediate in a way. Yeah, so
That's really interesting because it highlights the fact that poetry and narrative have different relationships with time and causality. You don't have to if if you're working on a narrative of characters, there's obviously attentional selection, but you've got to really pay attention to time, causality, and motivation. In that, I think you're right. Immediate is the good word. Poetry is just sort of immediate. It's evocative. And so that makes sense, actually. I've never really thought of that relationship because I myself have never really tried my hand at constructing either. Um, and with the pace of my life right now, I mean, there's so many things that I sort of think, oh, when I'm retired, I'll do that. Well, we'll see about that. But just because the urgency of all the immediate things that I deal with now. So you spent a few years now in this little corner in the community that has sort of arisen. Um, Regrets or appreciation for that? I mean, you're still one of the things that's interesting is when I think about I started making videos 6 years ago, five, 6 years ago. And it's really interesting to see sort of who's still here and who has moved on. And I don't really have any judgment about that because everybody has time in their time and cycles in their lives. And some people have, in fact, come, gone, come, gone. Some people have come and gone multiple times. And probably to a degree, everybody has done that on some level because there's times when focus and attention is intensive and other times when it's much more back. I just spoke with Julian last week, and so for him it's sort of been, in out, in out, in out. Where do you see your process in there? In sort of finding a writers group, did you find a niche that was easier to sort of inhabit, or what has that been like for you?
it's kind of more. I remember early on when the Discord first started, there was sort of a lot of excitement about that and sort of a bit of a different energy than there is now, I would say. Yeah, then that sort of led into the writers server, where for quite a few years there we were doing, well, it's still going on, but I'm not quite as involved as I was earlier on with just a lot of the book clubs and stuff. And then there's sort of been more other groups that have sort of risen up, like the art group that Sherry Harkins started. It's, it's probably where I'm most involved at this point. So yeah, it's sort of, I guess, I don't know, a few different sort of niches have sort of risen up and people have sort of spread out a bit more than at the beginning where it was kind of more all in one place. So yeah,
Well, I've peppered you with questions for a little while. Do you have questions for me or someplace else, some other direction you'd like to take this conversation?
Not really sure exactly. Did you have any questions or anything about the book? Or
Well, I've only had the book just arrived, so I haven't had much time with it.
yeah,
It is, it's a fairly fast read for people who look at the Divine Comedy and look at this. You can get a sense of the Divine Comedy fairly quickly. Um, I can, I can read more of it. Let's perhaps um, is there any particular poem in here that you thought was, stands out in terms of that you're particularly satisfied with?
well, a few people really like the first poem.
Yeah.
I think the the first poem in part two is pretty good as also.
Okay. Well, I'll try that one too. I didn't bring. I am increasingly now at the age of 61. My old age eyes are starting to catch up on me, and one of these days I'm gonna have to break down and get some more serious glasses. Asleep on the Sand. The title is Anchor Your Eyes Above. Asleep on the sand, head into a heat wave, water at your feet, retreats and proceeds, reminds you to breathe. You gasp, you expel the bitter burden in your chest. Beneath a new sky, you breathe your first breath. Screams drift into silence. Seabirds soar above. Icy limbs thaw. Eyes adjust to the light as you begin to pull yourself upright. From an obscure horizon, a mountain appears, relieved but not recovered, a new frontier in focus. Sand clinging to your skin. Panic still resides within. Waits below the waves, ready to pull you down into its depths. You need not walk on water. You need only remember. And then the grafted, I could probably read the whole book. I mean, it goes very quickly. Um, our faith and our brethren's failed in part. Some brethren died, separated from the body, and yet found favor in our Father. Others soon to be dead were receptive to God on the ground as they bled. Others walked the race, lacking an honest pace, until their life's last leg. We were rulers and kings, preoccupied with earthly things. We focused not on salvation, but finite cares of creation. He appointed us our place and granted us his grace. We were born beneath his star, yet like our brethren, failed to fully follow him. So our journey here can't yet begin. We must wait for a time before passing through fire to approach the divine. It's a nice sense of the mission of purgatory and the triage of souls that the Purgatorio is designed to address. If our aim is the mountain's peak, and if all looks around each corner, we can't reach it, let alone the stars. We'll fall back to the same place with new scars, A needle cannot bore through rock. Added effort bends it more. With pride inscribed on each step, we have no stone to stand on, to rise. Our staircase must fall, ask and it shall. Our edifice must crumble, seek and it will. Then you will find a door, knock, and it will open. Now of course, the versification of your poetry, does it sort of come out of the poetry, or do you have an external meter that you're attempting to meet?
Well, those ones don't really follow a meter. But in part three, a good amount of them do.
Okay. We can jump into paradise. My words are nothing in light of what I saw, and thus I ask the muses for their aid, that my words may be a slight glimmer of the glory of that place, that home, which our hearts long for, whose call forever beckons, but seems beyond what we can bear. Before you read on, dear reader, be warned. What I relay here defies black and white, transcends the literal symbolic divide. My flight into the heavens did thus begin. Like lighting in reverse, my guide and I rose in no time to heights beyond measure. My eyes and ears were both flung open. In one insightful flash, and soon greeted by stars alight with songs of light. The saints and angels both named and unknown, gleaming, torches aflame with the glory of God, lighting the path towards his perfection. The song of their presence sparked a thirst in me to know more deeply God. This was the wind and sail by which we ascended. My beloved and I, first to the moon, to Mercury, and every sphere, whose gems are varied shades, embedded in one crown. Now, your acknowledgement is interesting. I would like to thank my friend Mercury, who helped me at the outset of the writing process. Now, of course, some of us around here know someone who goes by Mercury, but you do know the Greek name for Mercury, don't you?
I'm not sure. Is it?
It's Hermes.
Yeah.
Of course, Hermes has a reputation around here, thanks to John Vervaeke. So
Yeah.
someone might read your acknowledgement and think you're slyly concealing Hermes. And of course, in a work like this, you know, I mean, Dante, I mean, there's a big debate. Was Dante, how does Dante stand with respect to the medieval world and the Renaissance world, to the degree that one sort of acknowledges that the Renaissance is a thing? It's funny because just like there's the debate whether the TLC is a thing, there's a debate as to whether or not the Renaissance is a thing. And but it's, of course, the Renaissance so completely, as was the medieval age, so tremendously conversant in mythology and pre-Christian mythology. So was your friend the Mercury that we know in this corner, or was your friend Hermes?
It's Mercury. There's that other sorting myself out
Right.
YouTube channel. Yeah.
Oh, no, he's been on the channel too. Big thanks to my friend Griswold Grimm, who helped push me over the finish line and provided helpful feedback on many of the initial and subsequent drafts of my poem. Now, some people will look at Griswold Grimm and think, oh, they don't know what to think. Most people don't know what to think about Grim Grizz. But he is a tremendously literate man.
Yeah.
And even though his literacy is sort of concealed by, I'd say, his art, anybody who pays any time at all with Griswold Grimm knows he is a man of letters. He really is. So how did he push you over the edge?
I just sort of kept bug kept bugging me to get it done, basically. So yeah, at first I sort of asked him to try to keep me accountable. And later, I'm not so sure I was very happy about that.
That's how accountability works.
Yeah,
Thanks to the Bastions of Beauty art group, provided me with a sense of community and connection during the writing process and aided me in making some decisions along the way. Thanks also to Nathan Woods for helping me edit the blurb on the back cover. Finally, I would like to thank a portion of the internet known as this little corner. The direct and indirect interactions I've had with this community have helped inform what I've written. That's really sweet. That's really sweet. Maybe we'll read the last poem entitled The Infinite. His mind evades every notion and grasp, mountain that rises and reaches no peak, transcending these words and all that we speak, beyond our senses, stories, and claims. Mountain that rises and reaches no peak, unreachable depths, the source of being, beyond our senses, stories, and claims, a darkness continually brought to light. Unreachable depths, the source of being, above the river, above the source of rivers and streams, a darkness continually brought to light, pillar that leads us through the night. His spirit descends like rivers and streams, worthy of worship, a fountain of light, pillar that leads us through the night, from slavery to freedom and further on. Worthy of worship, a fountain of light, music that meets us and calls us on, from slavery to freedom and further on, to the mountain and the city beyond. Music that meets us and calls us on, through fire and to the tree above, to the musical spheres turned by love. His mind evades our eyes and lips. Our thoughts are not the thoughts of God above. Our paradigms are always eclipsed by the mind that evades our eyes and lips. Our frame we must forever amend. For our paradigms are always eclipsed by the light of our God, the infinite. Our frame we must forever amend to approach the beginning and the end. That's the favorite one that I've read. I think it's really good. I think
yeah,
that would make a really good song. Because it's got nice elements of repetition. It's obviously sort of hyperlinking other works outside of it that at least I'm familiar with and so can comprehend as I read it. God is famously difficult to describe. I'll say it that way. And I think this poem does a nice job. Do you find poetry is something that isn't as easily exhausted as story?
So it's yeah, it's well similar to music. Um, People often listen to the same song over and over. I think some stories are sort of like that, though. Maybe something like The Lord of the Rings. S- Yeah, that's sort of something you could return to.
Yeah, the Lord of the Rings launched a genre. There are few works of literature that can claim that. You could argue that the Divine Comedy, well, the Divine Comedy was in some senses the peak of a genre, or perhaps um the coming together of a genre. But yeah, you're right, because music is something that we can tire of music, but it seems not as quickly of a story as we do a story. No, there's something there. Post-Christian wisdom, the only stone unturned. Schism and war always returned. Science ascended and left you behind. Corruption and abuse darkened your minds. You heard only hollow words, shouted down, neglected hallways, and echoed back. So many of you, my precious flock, are scattered and lost. But I have returned to bear your cross, to restore the broken and rein in the wayward, to unify the world beyond nation and land, with a staff of wisdom and a merciful hand. My flock, I call you back to me. It's time to end all enmity, as well as Christianity. My kingdom will come, and many more souls will be won. But that'll mark the end of my fun, for I'll burn in the fire, and the true Christ will come. Will he find any faith on the earth? That seems quite contemporary.
Yeah, yeah. And sort of a play on the Antichrist. Is the one who's reading the poem. I don't know if I fully achieved what I wanted to with the poem. I tried to put some things earlier on that were slightly off, not quite right, but I don't know if I totally did that to sort of hint that something was a bit off.
It's unusual in life to finish something and be totally satisfied with it.
Yeah, there's the one line about uh, have returned to bear your cross, which is sort of not quite should be in terms of, I guess the verse on the back of the book at the top there. So in terms of we're called to bear our own crosses also.
Are you a burst writer or a niggling editor?
It's probably more on the editor side. Yeah.
That's a problem with me. I'm a burst writer and I have no patience for editing. I find ed I find I so often instead of editing, I just write something and then it's a new thing. And it just goes before I did videos, I was doing more writing. And yeah, I so often that's part of the reason I never preach the same sermon twice. I just if I start editing, I just wind up redoing it. I find it so much easier to just make something new out of whole cloth and fiddle and perfect it.
Yeah.
Living hibernation, awoken by spring, accustomed to unconscious survival, but your flesh can no longer feed itself. Eyes weak, you prefer dark, cold sleep. Mourning the loss of our former state. You first warm to food and drink, and all things driven by instinct. You growl at everything in your way. You love too little, too tightly. You have and you hoard, and always feel unmoored. Eyes cast low, you run to what's immediate, seeing nothing else. You're gathering riches you cannot keep, fattening up for your final sleep. A false preparation. Instead, you cast off your flesh and accept death in anticipation of a second breath. It's good. Level with the devil. The air I breathe is cold. The trees yield no fruit. The horizon no hope. I've said, the sun should rise at any moment, too many times. My heart withers by bitter waves, and in its wake, a pit. I'm starting into the abyss. I see nails, thorns, and blood, a barren cross. Dark visions, which grow more malignant. A step away from falling. A slight hesitation between me and jumping. I slip and fall all the way down without a sound, but in my head, a clamor that echoes in my ear. A once indiscernible voice made clear, a too familiar tone that I've known in my bones. I'm drowning, and it offers air with a stare and a grin.
There's another one that you might want to read. It's called The Shade of Paradise. It's like the fourth poem or something.
Free from the shadowland, on the dappled shore we stand. We stand on the water's edge. We once hoped for wings to cross, but know to pride we would be lost. Across this moat we gaze, at the mountain reaching, like a vine towards the sun. The rays of that radiance sustain us with their song. Towards it we are drawn. The song the sirens imitate. We cannot move past intimation. We yearn for participation. We live in the light, once white, that splinters as it falls from infinite heights. From us, a pure light is hidden, yet we dwell not in perdition. Behind the gates of paradise, we are left to contemplate that song that emanates, the song the sirens imitate. One of the things that you learn as a preacher is your work goes out, and sometimes the things that I think really sing don't go at all, and sometimes the things that I think fall flat rise. Because once it goes out, it has a life of its own. And it's sort of like a child you bring into the world, and that child goes out into the world and does its own thing, quite apart from sometimes it achieves what you hope it achieves. Sometimes it achieves more, sometimes less. You never know. You never know. It's part of the excitement of it. Envy. I despise to see others acquire what I desired. I didn't seek to take, not only to be reminded of my ache. Was I not deserving? How could I live on daily bread so stale? Like a faithless servant, tugging at God's garment, waiting for him to deliver what I deserved. And I got it, for soon a fall brought me low and presented two paths, a darkness into which I wouldn't go further, the other lit by a seed of light that by his mercy did grow. First a bulwark against woe, then a cross to bear for many hearts' despair. Did you, when you set up the book, did you set up the pagination as well? Could you do that with the tools to put this together?
Sort of use this other program for the formatting. Yeah, so
Now, who did you use to publish this? Amazon?
yeah,
And was it so obviously it's available in Kindle?
yeah. I just made the Kindle version a week ago.
Okay, okay. But no, it's really fine. Very nice. Today is sermon day for me, Nolan.
Yeah.
So we got to land the plane.
Yeah,
Any final thoughts?
not too much really. Just, yeah, I hope people take a look at the book, and yeah, if they like it, a review on Amazon really helps.
I will dig up the Amazon link to it, and I'm going to send it to Peugeot and Roland as well. And maybe because I think it's a fine work. I think it's a fine work. And hopefully hearing some of the poems will give people a sense of it and desire to read the whole thing. And it won't take long. It's
Yeah,
not a big book, but I really like the last poem. There's something about firsts and lasts that are really important. And I think it ended strong. hopefully 2 more V's will make a song out of that one. So.
Yeah.
Very good, Nolan. And we look forward to seeing what you do next.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me about this.
Oh, absolutely. There's a few other people. I mean, really should have Valerie on. And so Valerie, if you listen to this, let me know. And you know, especially I don't is the anthology out yet? I think it's pre on Amazon, but
I think it might be out now.
okay. Watching someone search on Amazon, I know it's a very boring video. Creators of Meaning in Amazon. It is out. Good. Ooh, it's a good price. Buy with 1 click. That I can do. All right. So Valerie, contact me and I'll do the same with you on this. Let me make sure I can find this on Amazon so I can get the link right. There it is. All right. Very good. And I'll put the link below. Great.
Yeah.
Well done, Nolan.
Yeah.
It's good to talk to you.
Yeah. You too.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.